Hello there guys. Today I'm going to be building a kit which I first reviewed on my channel way back in October 2019, and I probably said in that video that I was planning to build it soon. So there you go, 6 years later is soon. Please don't go back and watch that old video, it's probably not very good. Although weirdly it does have 100% likes. This is the Dutch corner house in 1/35th scale from DioDump. DioDump is a Netherlands-based company who make both resin and plaster building kits and other accessories for dioramas and so on. I'd thoroughly recommend that you check them out. This video is not sponsored by them, but I have used them a few times for various accessories. This is the only kit that I built from them, and I think, as you'll see in this video, it's really quite a high quality product. This kit is really quite well packed, and it actually has survived shipping from the Netherlands to the UK. I bought it one summer, back in 2019 presumably. Then I would have carried it to Malaysia with me, because I was living there at the time. I never built it while I was living there, so then I've carried it back to the UK with me, and it survived all of those miles. We have a number of plaster pieces. DioDump used to, and I believe they still do, offer the option to cast their kits in resin rather than plaster for a slight increase in price, I think. We do get one resin piece here for the gutter, and as I'll show you towards the end of the video, we get some clear plastic for the windows, as well as some curtain materials as well, and some stained glass plastic. If we take a close-up look at these pieces, you'll see they're really nicely, sharply moulded. As I say, no damage despite all the miles they've done. Construction is fairly simple. 2 pieces for the walls, 1 middle wall, and then 2 pieces for the roof. The instructions recommend using either PVA or superglue to stick the plaster parts together. I use superglue, and there was just that small seam line there that I filled with model filler. You can also see in this shot here that we have the length of tiny styrene rod, which I've cut to the appropriate lengths to make those window frames. That was included in the kit. Now my aim for this kit is to build a small street with this as a backdrop, which can be used as a base for a range of military vehicles. So here, for example, I'm using my Tamiya Archer, just to give a sense of scale, while I cut the XPS foam for the road piece. Once I was happy with that size, and I'm trying to keep it quite small because I'm running out of space on my shelves, I use my carving tools to carve some cobblestones for the road and some paving slabs for the pavement. A great way to get a sort of semi-random texture on that road is to use some screwed up aluminium foil and roll it, press it down all over the surface. Just make sure you rotate the foil in your hand, otherwise you'll end up with the same shape stamped all over. Because XPS foam is quite porous, you can airbrush paint onto it all day long. So what I like to do is sort of semi-seal it with a coat of black acrylic paint, just cheap acrylic paint, over the top first. So here I've done that and then given it a varied coat of light grey. Of course I've realised that I've made a bit of a schoolboy error there, because I've carved the pavement into that base piece, so it's now the same level as the road, which is not quite right. So I went back, cut myself another piece of XPS foam to raise up that pavement, and I'll carve the path into that. I gave the building a light bit of pre-shading with XF1 black. You can see the remains of that there on the roof. And then, because I wanted a brown brickwork rather than a red, I found the best colour to use was AK Real Colours SCC2 Brown, which is a World War II British camouflage colour. To be honest, I didn't even prime this plaster before I sprayed that paint on there. And of course I've given it a deliberately patchy coat again because I don't want a uniform solid colour. I used Vallejo model colours to paint some of the bricks slightly different shades of brown. As I always say, and as you can see here from these yellow bricks, this always looks a bit contrasty at first, but it really dies down with varnish and with weathering. And of course with viewing distance, because here you're viewing this in a 4K video filmed with a macro lens. These were the three paints that I used: khaki grey, chocolate brown and US field drab. What I tend to do is just put them on a piece of aluminium foil and then just constantly mix them, so I'm never using the exact same shade for more than one or two bricks. Here we have the building with the door, the roof and the gable ends painted, all airbrushed. Because I wanted a terracotta sort of look to the roof, I mixed my own orange with a red and a yellow basically, and I think that looks pretty decent. Window frames are brush painted with Vallejo model colour, and of course not forgetting the leading on the roof. On the road I took a very similar approach to the brickwork. I took these four colours here to mix a variety of custom greys and then slightly discoloured greys to break up the single colour of the cobblestones. You really don't need many paints here. Mixing them in different ratios and even thinning them with different amounts of water will get you plenty of shades. And again, those tan colour cobblestones might look out of place, but they will tone down. And if you do look at real brickwork or real road work, you will often see individual stones that are a completely different colour to the rest. Both the road and the building were then given a coat of VMS flat varnish to protect the paintwork. And then I moved on to the weathering, starting with the road. In my quest to use up some of the modelling resources which I have acquired over the years, I decided to go with some pigments for the road weathering, starting with this dark earth from Ammo. This was really supposed to go in the gaps between the cobblestones and act as a kind of dirt/mortar. That didn't go quite to plan, but one thing you can see here for sure is that a small amount goes a long way. What I probably should have done was continue to brush this with an empty dry brush into all those crevices. What I did instead was get a bit panicky about how brown the cobblestones were turning, and I decided to use some water and then some thinner to try to remove that pigment from those cobblestones. That wasn't particularly effective because it made essentially a liquid pigment which then flowed across the cobblestones even more. And although it doesn't look too bad on camera here, the road does look a bit too dirty for my preference at this stage. My first attempt at a solution was to use a lighter pigment, in this case the European Earth pigment, to try and tone down some of that brown colour. This again was applied on dry, and again probably didn't really make anything better, in fact probably made it quite a lot worse. And again, as I tried to remove it, it removes a lot of the variation in tone on the road and turns everything into this sort of pale, mushy, grey-brown colour. As you can see, the end result is the road looks a bit of a mess. So having left it to dry overnight and thought about the problem, I figured the next day what I could do is dry brush some grey paint on top and try to sort of reclaim some of that road texture from those pigments. So this is a variety of grey colours, quite heavily dry brushed over the top to hopefully get the paint on those high points and get rid of the pigment from them. And I think that doesn't look too bad. The road is still quite dirty compared to the house, but we haven't weathered the house yet. But I think it does look a lot better than it did previously. To try to improve it further, I took some sepia oil paint from Abteilung 502, thinned it with odourless thinner, and added it to the gaps between some of the cobblestones, and hopefully that brought some of the contrast back. Because it was quite heavy contrast, I only wanted to do that fairly sparingly. As a final touch for the road, I attached very small amounts of green scatter to various parts of the curb and the gutter to simulate moss and similar grime, and that was attached using PVA glue. As I mentioned earlier, in the DioDump kit we get some accessories to really liven up the building. So we get this printed transparent plastic, which is supposed to be some stained glass for the door. We get some street signs, an alternative pattern for the stained glass, clear plastic for the windows, and then these printed pieces of corrugated plastic to simulate curtains. This is a really nice touch. I think it's something it'd be quite hard to represent yourself. I suppose you could print them out on paper, but I think it's quite a nice touch here to really bring the building to life. We get 2 sheets of each pattern, and each sheet should easily cover a window. And there's our stained glass in place. Initially I used PVA glue to stick these pieces into position, but to be honest I then found it just as easy to use some masking tape to stick them from the inside. Because I've got no interior for the building, I did have all the curtains closed, but I did cut down the centre of those curtain pieces to try to make it look like 2 curtains being drawn together. And I did want one small extra detail, so I took this box of civilian figures from Masterbox, and I took this boy here on the left. I don't need his legs, so I only built his upper body. And he will be peeking out from in front of the curtains at the action going on in the street below. I also needed to weather the building a little bit, so I used the same sepia oil paint wash, mainly over the roof area here, to darken and dirty it up. And I went quite heavy, especially on the roof tiles. For the building itself, I use an oil paint dot filter to simulate dirt and streaking and rain marks and so on. This is a combination of small dots of grey and buff oil paint, and then just like I've done on armoured vehicles before, I run them with a bit of odourless thinner down the building in the direction of gravity. In the case of the building, this also has the effect of looking a little bit like mortar in some of those bigger crevices. And it just has that effect of blending the brick colours in and making things look a bit less uniform. I use some slightly darker oil paints at the bottom of the building and streak those upwards to simulate dirt from the pavement. I gave the boy figure a quick paint. When I was painting the face here, I felt like it didn't really come across as a child's face. Instead, it looks like it's more of an adult face that's just scaled down. if you see what I mean. Nevertheless, he was given a bit of a paint and then put into position in front of the curtains. And with that complete, my street base was ready. So there we go guys, that was my quick build of a roadside base using the Dutch corner house from DioDump. I really enjoyed building this. I thought the design of the kit and the moulding was really good. And although I do like building my own buildings out of XPS foam, something like this, which is slightly unusual, not so common, also makes a nice addition to the modelling shelf. On the screenshot I showed you of the website, this was €32. I can't remember how much I paid for it 6 years ago, but €30 is still a decent price, I would say, for this, especially given those accessories that you get like the street signs and the curtains and so on, to really bring it to life. I'm sorry it's been a while since I've uploaded a video. I've just been super busy in the last few weeks, but I do have lots of projects that are almost ready to upload. In fact, the biggest problem I have right now is actually finding time to edit the video content. I've got about 500 gigs of videos ready to edit and upload. That includes things like the Prince of Wales, the York, which I'm still working on, and a few others which will remain a surprise. So thank you very much for watching and for making it this far. Special thanks to my Patreon supporters and YouTube members. And until next time, thanks again for watching and have fun modelling.